Hello, I'm Mary Schweers, and welcome to Following the Trails. And all of you know that we, as genealogists, we have ancestors from time to time who couldn't stay in one place. And what we're going to review tonight are the reasons why some of them jumped around so much, and how to follow their progress as they traveled. It can be difficult at times, but it can be done. We're going to start way back, okay? And the reasons for migration. Why do people leave? Economic reasons, religion, that's a big one. You'll see a lot of migrations based on religious freedom. Land, that's another big one. People wanted their own place, their own land. Jobs, and you have to figure out if they were pushed out or pulled over. What pushed them or what pulled them to just leave their homeland or whatever and move to a new place. I'm gonna try to move this here. Okay. During the Norman conquest, William the Conqueror came to England from France. And right after he moved there was a census taken, a doomsday book. And that book is available. There were an influx of immigrants who changed the language and the customs of England. So that starts that migration there. This is the Doomsday Book. It's available. It's England's Heritage, and it has a lot of information, a lot of genealogy information. It also has a lot of information on the changes in the customs and things like that. So if any of you are doing research back in that time, this is what they talk about when they are talking about the Doomsday Book. So this was about the census that was done after William the Conqueror. Okay, Germans to Russia. In 1763, Catherine the Great of Russia promised freedom of religion. Okay, that was a big pull. A reprieve from taxes, free land, and no military service requirements for settlement of Germans in Western Russia. She was trying to get them there to farm the land, okay, to become productive. But she also wanted a wall, defense between, in the western area of Russia between against Asia, so there wouldn't be anything coming, no surprises from Asia. In 1871, that special status was taken away, and these German Russians moved to the Dakotas in the US. Austria and Hungary also offered the incentives to these immigrants, but the Germans were expelled from Romania, Hungary, and Slovenia after World War II. Okay, so from 1763 to 1871, all these Germans flocked to Russia, and then all of a sudden, that was all revoked. And a lot of these German Russians moved to the Dakotas. Alsace-Lorraine. Now, I have known a lot of people who have had some genealogy adventures in this area because it kept changing, German, French, German, French, okay? And it was during the after effects of the 30-Year War. The King of France promised Swiss citizens religious freedom and land to migrate to this area. So this area was changing French, German, French, German, but there were also a lot of Swiss citizens moving in for religious freedom and land. Of course, the biggie, the Irish potato famine, 1840 to 1941. Population of Ireland went from 8 million to less than 4.1 million. They estimate that over 1 million or more died from starvation because the potato was the basis of their diet. They tried to give them rice, but nutrition-wise, rice and potatoes are totally different things. Immigration was to North. Another biggie for being pushed out were the revolutions. The French Revolution, 1789, a lot of the upper class basically ran for their lives, and they mainly ran to England. And then in the Russian Revolution in 1917, most went to France. Okay, so you'll see a pattern of, especially if you're looking at DNA, you think your family comes from Russia or France, and they actually have Russian background. I had that on one side of my family. We always thought they were from France, but Russian keeps coming up in DNA. Okay. I don't know if I have a question. Okay. Now, another big thing was religious persecution. Spain in 1492 expelled Jews and Muslims. In Netherlands and Belgium, 16th century, controlled of Spain, Catholic Protestants moved north. France in the 17th century expelled Protestants, or the Huguenots, who went to England, Netherlands, Switzerland, Holland, and Germany. Religious preference often changed with rulers, and migration went back and forth depending on basically who was in power. So especially England went back and forth, Catholic, Protestant, or Anglican, Catholic, Anglican. So a lot of people left there for that. Jews were forced to live in ghettos at the end of the 19th century, many of them in Eastern Germany. They moved to Western Europe and the US, and after the Holocaust, survivors mainly moved to Israel. So you'll find a lot of post-Holocaust Germans moving to Israel, but there were some migrations to the United States. Okay. You had to know where they were entering the United States. Castle Garden was an immigration point in New York City. It opened up in July of 1855, and its main purpose was to forewarn the immigrants about what they were going to encounter once they left the station. It wasn't so much a checkout place or examination, but they were mainly there just to teach the arrivals what to look out for. Later on, they did start doing health checks. Now, Ellis Island, as we all know, in New York, opened up in January 1892. And they had a fire, and it reopened after the fire in December 1900. Closed completely in November 12, 1954. Okay, there was in between Ellis Island and Castle Garden, a place called the Barge Office. Now, the Barge Office was basically an office in New York City. The port wasn't out on an island. It ran from 1890 till 1892 when Ellis Island opened. And then they reopened it again after the Ellis Island fire in 1897 to 1900. So 1897 to 1900, it wasn't necessarily Ellis Island, it was the barge office that they went through. In the West, it was Angel Island in San Francisco, okay? And that ran from 1910 to 1940. And that mainly processed Asian, Russian, and Australian immigrants. And they had a lot to do in the early Japanese lockdowns with segregating those. In Baltimore, it was the Western Gate through the 19th century. Immigrants came to Baltimore because that was where they could spread out west. They came to Baltimore and purchased train tickets to other Western locations. And in Philadelphia in the 19th century, they had to stop at the, I'm going to say this wrong, Lazaretto Island. And that's where they did quarantine. Now, not a lot of people came to Philadelphia because that was a 200-mile more journey, okay? So you had a longer extended journey if you went to Philadelphia. New York was quicker. And then they added this stop at this island for quarantine. So a lot of people didn't come to Philadelphia. They mainly went to New York, Baltimore, and Angel Island for processing. Okay, so how did the United States attract all these people? Any adult who had never taken up arms against the US was eligible, including women and immigrants who had applied for citizenship under the Homestead Act of 1862. They were eligible for land, okay? It opened up millions of acres in the West. In 1866, it opened up inclusion to African Americans. By 1900, 1/4 of the Black farmers in the South were owned their own farms, okay? There were requirements. You had to live on the land, make improvements, and farm for 5 years. And the fee for this application was just $18. Now, for that $18, you got quite a bit of land. And not only did you get that land, but your wife, if you were married, your wife got that land also. The same amount. Okay, now I'm going to try some tricky stuff here, so bear with me. But the best source of finding why your ancestors might have left is the Government Land Office, GLOW, and it's the custodian of millions of land title documents, some dating back to the 1700s. They do have searchable records online, and I'm going to attempt to go here to show you some of the records they have. The records are also some available in Ancestry and Family Search, but there is the website. It's www.glorecords.blm.gov. And I'm going to click there, and hopefully we'll go there. Hopefully I won't lose you. Never tried this before on a
That's
Zoom.
not going to work, Mary. You'll have
That's
to
not gonna
share
work?
you'll have to share the other screen.
Can you see it? No.
No,
Okay.
you would have to share your web browser, not the PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. All right, there we go. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. This is the Bureau of Land Management. Okay, now we know how to do that. Can work it. Okay. And see if I can, whoops. Now I can see if I can go down.
It doesn't work in Zoom, Mary.
It does, yeah, it does. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Can you see the land management site?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Under here, they have land patents, federal land patents. They have survey plats, and field notes. They have land status records. They have control documents and index records, and they also have track books. Okay, this is a lot of information. I'm gonna move this back up here. This will keep you busy for a while. They also have land catalogs and different information. And you can search. There we go. So you can search by type, go to the state, okay, type a last name, and this is how you can find out that you have what information they have on what land your ancestors may have been given. Okay, there's also a reference center. Okay, and they have different things. They also have search tips in case you want to learn how to do a efficient search there. And we got Eastern States patents. We got appendices, glossaries, and all sorts of different things to help you. This is about bounty of information if you're looking for information on what land patents your ancestors might have gotten. So if you find an ancestor in one place and suddenly they're not there anymore, go look and see if they had a land patent. Okay, now I'm going to stop sharing this. And I'll go back to this. Oh, no, I'm going to go back to this. Okay. All right. Again, this is the best one to do research in. And again, Ancestry has some, Family Search has some, but you might as well go to the horse's mouth and see what you can find on there. And as you can see, they got tons of information. Okay. Okay. bounty land. It started in 1776 as a reward for revolutionary soldiers who fought for the new nation. Those gifts were mainly in the state of Ohio. Okay. And then again, bounty land was given to other soldiers, the War of 1812, Mexican War, and the early Indian Wars. No bounty land was provided for Civil War veterans. However, if they fought in a previous war, so if they were a veteran of the War of 1812 and the Civil War, they were eligible. There were a number of Union soldiers who applied for land under the Homestead Act, which Confederate soldiers were not qualified. So even if you were, or they were a veteran of 1812 and they fought on the Confederate side, they were no longer eligible because technically they raised arms against the United States. Bounty land warrants for 1812 are on fold 3, if you have access to that. And if you find an ancestor in bounty land warrants or patents, the National Archives will have more information. You can request records from the National Archives on those bounty land warrants. Okay, now we're going to be talking about the trails within the United States. When people went to migrate in the United States, it was not an easy job as driving from coast to coast these days. I mean, it was wilderness. There was mountains. There were no roads, okay? So the roads that were built were the ones that led to the early migration. And one of the first roads built by the United States government in 1806, well, it was approved in 1806 and construction started in 1811. And they finally got to Illinois 27 years later. That's how difficult this road was to build. It's called the National Road. It connected the Potomac River area, so Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, to the Ohio River area. It was an important route west, but no known list of trail users is known to exist. Okay, some trails have lists and pioneers databases and all that kind of good stuff. This one doesn't. What you have to look at is if you had an ancestor settle near a road, you might be able to trace back to a place of origin on a connecting road, if that makes any sense. The best bet, if you are searching and to find an area traveled through, is the newspapers. A lot of times the local newspapers may have had a story about them leaving. It may have had advertisements for, wagon trains or going west. And then there may have been instances along the trail that made other local newspapers. So you look in these little towns and see if they have any newspapers archived, and you can search them. Okay. And while that sounds like it may be an impossible task, it's not. I did some work for a customer and they had a relative suddenly disappear from the area, and they couldn't figure out why they left. So I found out they got a land grant, and they were traveling there, and they stopped in a town out west. I can't remember right now exactly where it was. And I guess they had gambling, because all of a sudden the husband started gambling and the wife actually filed for a divorce. So I found where the it's never completed, because they were still married, 20 years later, and they didn't make it to their land, and they settled there for a while, but then they moved back home. And that was the missing era we were looking for. So searching newspapers along the trail may get you information on what happened with your ancestors. Okay, you can also look for additional information in local land records. Not all land records are online, but if you knew they were going to a certain location, you could find land records at the county or the town, and you should be able to find some information on them there. Okay, this is a map of the national road, and you can see Frostburg, Uniontown, Washington, St. Clairsville, Zanesville, Columbus, Springfield, Richmond, Indianapolis, Terre Haute, and Effingham. Okay, all the way to Vandella. I don't know how to pronounce that, Vandella. Okay, so a lot of times these wagon trains weren't, zooming right on through. If the weather got bad or something, they would stop in the towns, and sometimes they settled there for a little while before moving on. And you might be able to find something in some of the major newspapers, or land records, or other things. And so you need to look up a map of the trails that were available to them, the roads that were available to them during that time. Okay, we've all heard of the Cumberland Gap. Well, that was basically found in 1775 by Daniel Boone. He first marked the trail which allowed travel from Virginia to Kentucky. And basically the Cumberland Gap became a gateway to the West. And that was one of the easiest ways to get through those mountains. Between the 18th and 19th centuries, over 200,000 migrants traveled the Gap to the West. Okay, it's not to be confused with the National Road or the Cumberland Road. That's another name for the National Road. 1818 from Baltimore to Jefferson City, Missouri. Okay, so there was another National Road, Cumberland Road, 1818, and it ran from Baltimore to Jefferson City, Missouri. Okay, and there's where the Cumberland Gap was, right there. But you can see its connections to the Great Valley Road, the Wilderness Road, and other roads that went through Hagerstown, Martinsburg, Winchester, Harrisonburg, Staunton, Roanoke, Bristol, all those areas around here, but they were trying to get further west. And that basically ended in Lexington, Kentucky. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the trails out west. So when they were working on spreading west, manifest destiny, if any of you remember that term, manifest destiny meant that the United States would reach from ocean to ocean. And these slowly became involved. Now, before all of that, there were trade routes already established from Mexico to the United States and within the Republic of Texas and other areas claimed by Mexico. So there were established trade routes there. And they started with the Santa Fe Trail. They went the mountain route or the lower route, and they went to Santa Fe, and then from there they could go down to Chihuahua, Mexico. Now, again, this was a pre-established trade route that was just basically expanded for Western expansion. The Santa Fe Trail went from Franklin, Missouri to Santa Fe, New Mexico. You can see where it dips off and goes down to Louisiana. Or no, that's Mississippi River, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong thing. I apologize. The route went from Franklin, Missouri to Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was a trade route, a supply route, a pioneer route, and it later led to the California gold fields. California Gold Rush, there were many people who used that trail. Now, this was a tricky trail because it was further north, it was over the mountains, and when weather got bad, they were kind of stuck. So it also led to Colorado or northern New Mexico. Okay, I got a question. Is there a most likely route from Raleigh, Massachusetts to Scott City, Indiana, arriving that country in 1820? County in 1820. Travel was probably between 1850 and 1820. Okay. I will look at that. I'm going to give you a resource here in a few moments that may help you look for different major routes. Okay, and then we get to the Oregon Trail. Okay, Federal Donation Act of 1850. It gave 320 acres to any white male citizen, or those wanting to be citizen, who settled in the Oregon, California, Washington basic area by December 1st, 1850. So you had a date to be there. Wives were eligible for 320 additional acres. Okay, so they gave you 640. And after that date to 1853, men only got 160 and the wife received an equal amount. Okay, and I'm going to try to do this thing. There are tons of information on the pioneers traveling on the Oregon Trail, and I'm going to show you a few of them. Okay, so I have to click here. Stop share. Screen share. There we go. And share. Okay. This one is really good. It is the Oregon California Trails Association. Okay, and it has maps, and it does talk about chapters, but it also has a lot of the trail information. You can see here, Missouri and Kansas, Southern Trails, Idaho Trails, Nevada, Butterfield Overland Trail. And then it goes into genealogy and paper trail. I don't know if I have to stop share and share again. Is there a handout? No, but if you miss anything, this will be again shown again live on the Harf County Historical Society's website's YouTube channel. That's it. Okay, I'm gonna go into screen share again. There we go. And share. Okay. And this, okay, the paper trail is a searchable database of different information on remarkable journeys with names, places, surveys, and different things. So you go to the paper trail, and there is a membership with this, and you can get your ancestors a Western Immigrant Trail Certificate, complete with complete and mail the certificate application, pay the fee, and you'll receive a certificate to honor your immigrant ancestor. So we have the paper trail. Let me have to stop share. I apologize about this. Okay. That same thing where we were. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, and they have different things. Available news, the Overland Journal. And there we go. It's a quarterly journal of research. Of course, you have to pay a fee, or have to, it's password protected for members only. But there is a lot of information on different things, diaries, publications, trail diaries, and other websites. Stop sharing again. Share screen. There we go. All right. And there is the Oregon Genealogy Society. I don't know why that's not coming up as a mark, but that is www.oregongs.org. Okay, and then we're going to go to the Oregon Pioneers. Share. Okay. All right. This is different information on Oregon, its pioneers, cemeteries, the Historical Society, the Brooks, Oregon Historical Society, different highlights of history, the Whitman Massacre, descendants of Jacob Flory, and different descendants. Okay, and everyone should be seeing the Oregon Trail thing again. Okay, if you're not, please raise your hand. Okay, the Oregon sons and daughters of the Oregon pioneers. There we go. Okay, again, this is membership, but I had a customer who we found out their ancestors were on the Oregon Trail, and this was very much a big help to them. Okay, it goes into a lot of information about different things, the ancestors who traveled the Oregon Trail. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you can see the route of the Oregon Trail and also the Mormon Trail. We'll get into that in a few moments. The Oregon Trail was through a northern mountainous area. We all know the stories of different pioneers who ran into problems, but they had to get to a certain area by a certain time, or else they wouldn't make it over the mountains. And this was very treacherous as far as weather went. But those are all the areas that it passed through: Fort Boise, Fort Hale, the cutoff, the South Pass, Independence Rock. I think that's where they had to go. They also had the Winters Quarters, the Chimney Rock, Scotts Bluff, Devil's Gate, all these different markers. And you can still travel this area. The Oregon Trail is very much a national treasure, and you can go out and visit these places and see the areas that were traveled.
Mary, you
Yes,
have
sir.
about 15 minutes left.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about the Mormon Trail. The Pioneer database at the website of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, okay, and it's there, www.historychurchofjesuschrist.org, okay. Also, they have some information at www.earlylds.com and the Utah Division of Archives and Record Services, so www.archives.utah.gov and www.octatrails.org. Pioneers who borrowed money to travel were still required to pay it back, and they were published, and that's found on Family Search. The Southern Immigrant Trail, this was a easier trail to do because it was in the desert. There wasn't any worry about snow, ice, mountains that are, that were so treacherous. That was used mainly in the California Gold Rush. It followed the Santa Fe Trail to New Mexico. The problems, it didn't have the snow and ice, but it did have high heat and lack of water, and there's no complete list known. So you would have to check on different things with cities and towns and other historical societies. Okay, and check your own family stories. This is a customer that I assisted, and they came up with this letter about a family member who left Illinois, went to California, and they were part of a wagon train and they took a train to Omaha, and then they were outfitted with a 40 wagon train. And when they got to Arizona, they kind of split off and did different things. So check your own family stories for different things. Basically, if you're going into a research on family,
Sure, I understand.
On family trails, you have to use a lot of patience. You're going to be doing a lot more research and possibly not finding as much information as you would like. Learn to use Google. Google is your best friend. Newspapers, Google Books. If any of you are not familiar with Google Books is another form of Google, but if all you have to do is go to Google, type in Google Books, go to Google Books, and you are searching literally millions of libraries. Okay, land records are huge, also census. Okay, and now I'm going to stop sharing. And do we have any other questions? Okay. Anonymous attendee. Okay. Is there most likely a route from Raleigh, Mass to Scott City, Indiana, arriving by the founding of that county in 1820? Travel was probably between 1850 and 1820. Okay. You're going to have to search routes and history of the area, and you're going to have to look for county records. I recommend Google Books to do that research. Any other questions? All right. None? All right. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. I could have basically done a whole lot more on this. I didn't cover all the trails, but if you search you do a Google search on Western trails for immigrants or immigration, you'll come up with a whole lot more trails that I didn't even mention. There were quite a few, especially in the South. There were the King's Roads that led from New England down to like Georgia, and then other trails that went to other areas. This was all before the railroads, okay? And the railroads followed a lot of the same trails. So that made migration a little bit easier, but still to get over different things, you had to take a wagon train. There was only one way. And if there's no more questions, oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much. And again, there is not a handout, but the information, if you miss taking notes, it will be repeated again on our YouTube channel in a few weeks. And again, I remind you of the genealogy book sale at the Historical Society. Feel free to look there. We have a lot of information. It's not all specific to Harford County. There's other areas we cover. And if you enjoyed this presentation and want to make a donation to the Society, you can go to www.harfordhistory.org and make a donation there. We will appreciate it. And thank you very much.